soldier. He becomes one the instant he realizes the gunfire he hears is intended to kill him. Britt's landing craft ground ashore. Men began to unload it, but then there was a deafening rattle of fire, and Britt looked up and saw a French plane diving toward him, strafing his regiment. There had been no pre-invasion bombardment, in the hopes that the French would not put up any resistance. Many of Britt's fellow invaders carried American flags, figuring the French would be less likely to fire on U.S. troops. The flags made no difference. Britt and his men stopped unloading the craft, headed for safety across the beach, and then moved inland. By midday they had reached a pre-assigned assembly area near a road bridge. Then Britt returned to the beach with a sergeant to salvage the jeeps and equipment he'd been forced to leave in the landing craft. The first edge of my excitement was beginning to dull, and when another strafing plane came over, I hit the beach in utter terror, digging madly into the sand. The plane soon passed over in search of more targets. For 5 long minutes, Britt lay flat, terrified, trying to summon the courage to get back on his feet. He then found his landing craft, but before he and the sergeant could pull off several guns and 2 remaining jeeps, the landing craft sank in the rough seas. There was more bad news. Britt learned that a submarine torpedo had hit our transport standing offshore, and all our equipment went down with it. We lost all our barracks bags, food, kitchens, and other equipment. All we had left was the clothes on our backs and the rations we carried. We were tired, sick, and disgusted. Britt and the sergeant had no option but to walk back across the beach and rejoin their company at the assembly point by the road bridge. By early afternoon, Fadela was in American hands, and Britt and his company were marching toward Casablanca, 16 miles to the southwest. Britt's regiment encountered minimal resistance while taking dozens of French soldiers as prisoners. Allied Supreme Commander Dwight Eisenhower arranged a ceasefire with Vichy French forces 48 hours later on November 10th, and Casablanca was occupied with fewer than 70 men killed from Britt's division, although by the time the guns fell silent in all of Morocco, there had been some 1,500 Allied casualties. Britt and his fellow Marne men, as the 3rd Division soldiers were known, had been initiated into the full chaos and confusion of combat in a couple of hectic, feverish days. They'd fought with barely any armored support, yet had successfully spearheaded the first U.S. invasion of the war. "My biggest thrill," Britt wrote his wife, "and one that I'm sure I'll never recapture, was when my boys performed so heroically that at least 3 will be decorated for outstanding bravery." Far bloodier battlefields and much greater danger were in store for Maurice Britt, but unlike so many of his fellow junior officers, his background and training had prepared him to endure the ordeals ahead. Britt had in fact trained for combat since the harshest days of the Great Depression, when he first donned an Army uniform in 1937 as a freshman in the ROTC program at the University of Arkansas. He was quick-witted, tough, and humble, with no airs or graces, an optimist by necessity, having grown up dirt poor in rural Arkansas. He was born in the small town of Carlisle, in the state's rice-growing region, and already knew what death meant. When he was 9, his father was badly hurt in an industrial accident and given less than 5 years to live. It lasted 4. Britt's mother was left with 2 boys, 9-year-old Basil and 13-year-old Maurice, to bring up on her own. Each cent counted, and Britt worked every hour he could, stacking wood, picking fruit, chopping cotton. In high school, he was an exceptional athlete, playing basketball and football and starring on the track team. His teammates nicknamed him Footsie because he had such big feet. Size 12, WWII. He studied as hard as he worked to feed his family, graduating